play on this thing. Let's go.
Yeah, we've just finished our first 6 months of research here in Darwin, and to give you guys a little bit of an insight as to what has been happening over the past 6 months, we are going to start releasing a series of videos.
So the videos will be released once every month, and they're going to be about the programs that we have here, and they're going to be about what people do while they're here and all the stuff that happens. My name is Raf.
My name is Chelsea Waters.
I am the director and creator of IMR.
I am the director of the Institute for Marine Research.
How many years have you been diving?
I have been diving since I was 8 years old.
How many years have you been diving?
I don't even know when I started diving.
That would be... Oh, I suck at math.
I was 18, I think. So 7 years.
How old am I? 29. I'm 29.
No,
So
you're
that means
28. 20 years, people.
yay. 20 years.
My first placement was actually in Australia. There's a beach that was really close to where I grew up, and it was actually a turtle nesting beach. So the Australian government does have a nesting project that they run every Christmas, and so that's something that I became pretty heavily a part of every Christmas in between my uni break.
My first marine conservation placement was as National Park Ranger in Peru, and I was in charge of just taking care of the national park. We would do everything from painting signs to helping people who got in their cars stuck in sand and stuff like that, to helping clean up dead sea lions.
What's the most difficult thing living on a research base?
The lack of cheese.
The lack of cheese.
Sometimes the power goes off and there's nothing you can do about it because a big storm rolled through.
Also, sometimes just in terms of the isolation, it's not exactly easy to, Amazon, like that's not a thing. You can't just have things delivered to the area with ease of access.
Why did you want to create a new research base rather than working for one that was already established?
That is a great question.
It was pretty much an opportunity that came up. We were looking to go work somewhere else, and then all of a sudden this opportunity came to actually create our own research base, and we saw this as a chance to create a research base the way that we would have wanted all the places that we've worked in the past to be.
Just because there is already a research project in place, and just because there's already a methodology that's also in place, doesn't mean that the project is actually effective. So for me, starting IMR was the chance to essentially take all of my favorite methodologies and put them into one place.
What's your favorite research method?
By far my favorite research method is SVS, which is what we call the fish laser. The fish laser is basically 2 GoPros that can videotape fish, and using a very specialized software that we have, we can then measure the fish and even weigh it.
Impax is my favorite methodology, so assessing things like coral bleaching, crown of thorn starfish population numbers, coral disease. It's a really great way to understand what is actually happening within our local reef, and essentially what are the conservation efforts that we can put in place to help resolve these issues.
Which dive site is your favorite?
My favorite dive site would be Celaya South, which is a really cool dive site. It's a big old slope, and the reason I love it so much is there's always these huge schools of snapper that are always hanging out there.
Apple Island, that has the most amount of coral diversity. It's the most beautiful dive site I've ever been to in the world, and it also has a lot of different butterfly fish, which I admire.
What 3 tips would you give for research divers?
Tip 1, be ready for everything. As soon as you go down there, I feel like you always have a plan. There's always a research plan that you're trying to initiate, but be open to the fact that that isn't always going to come through, and you do need plans B and C.
Be ready for any type of emergency.
Tip number 2 is there are some times we're going to be upside down. So yeah, definitely get used to not always being in the perfect trim when doing research dives.
I always recommend people have their own gear.
Tip number 3, I would say, is always remember what your goal is when it comes to doing a research dive. It's not always going to be, sunny skies and beautiful weather and beautiful visibility. So just remember why you're there, and really, notice the finer details of those dives.
When you're research diving, even if you're only in open water or advanced certified or an equivalent, you are doing diving that it tends to be more advanced than just fun diving. So you do have to be prepared for these kinds of situations.
What makes Darwin a great place to explore in the Philippines?
I think the really cool thing about Darwin is that it's very much an up and coming place.
Darwin is still untouched, which is exciting. That's something that is really exciting nowadays, I guess, in terms of social media and all of that. I feel like this place is still yet to be discovered.
Darwin isn't a giant tourist hub. You won't find hundreds of hostels here. You won't find massive, 1,000 people plus hotels or anything like that. It's very much still a small town.
Which means that there's so many times when you can go to beaches and you can go to waterfalls and just no one is there. And that's really exciting.
So if you're a very dive-oriented person, it is a really cool place to come and not be surrounded by huge crowds. Yeah, so guys, you know what to do. Subscribe, like it.
See
if
you
want to
next
stay
time.
in touch. You can follow us on Facebook. We have Instagram at Institute Marine Research.
Yep.
All that stuff.
Fun.